All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're headed to Tel Lachish.
Uh-huh.
It's this ancient site in the southern Levant. So we're talking like modern day Israel, southern Lebanon, the Sinai Peninsula, parts of Jordan.
Yeah.
And what's really cool about Lachish is the just how far back it goes.
Right.
We're talking like back to the Neolithic
Yeah. Way back
and
years.
Chalcolithic periods.
Right.
Like way, way before what we think of as recorded history.
Yeah. Yeah.
On through the Canaanite and Bronze Ages. And it's this place that's just layer upon layer upon layer.
Exactly. It's incredible. All these different civilizations all built up over time. It's really amazing to see.
Yeah. For this deep dive, we dove into a bunch of transcripts from archaeological expeditions.
Oh, nice.
To really bring out some of the most interesting stuff about Lachish. Our mission today is to really figure out how this site developed, like why was it so important back then, and then what happened, what led to its destruction.
Yeah. It's a pretty dramatic story, actually.
Yeah.
Uh,
We want to give you, the listener, a really good understanding of why Lachish is such a big deal, historically speaking.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go all the way back.
All right.
To those like prehistoric times.
Way back.
Yeah.
So you're talking Neolithic, Chalcolithic, and, in those periods, you see this shift
Right.
from like scattered settlements to something a little more organized.
Okay.
Right. And then you move into the Bronze Age, and that's when you get clay pottery, which it sounds simple.
Yeah.
But it was huge.
Right. I guess for storage and stuff.
Yeah, storage, but also for, just being able to have a settled agricultural way of life.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you can't store food,
Right.
then, you're constantly on the move.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was really a game changer.
Yeah. And then the idea of societies becoming more the sources use this term ravuta,
Oh, yeah.
which is like a
Specialization of professions.
yeah.
Right? So it's not just about, how many people live there or whether they have walls.
Right.
It's about, do they have, blacksmiths and potters and weavers and, this kind of division of labor.
Right.
Which is a real hallmark of urban development.
Okay.
Because that creates interdependence.
Right.
And it drives innovation, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're just focused on one thing,
Right.
you're going to get really good at it.
Yeah.
And then you can trade with other people who are really good at their thing.
Yeah.
And everyone benefits. And so you see this, in the southern Levant during the early Bronze Age, which was this time of relatively stable climate.
Okay.
And, people were able to establish, agricultural practices.
Right, right. And then like smack in the middle of all that is Lachish. It's like one of the biggest, most important cities of the whole Bronze Age.
That's right. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a local Canaanite name, and but we don't know what it means.
Right. I mean, that's the case with a lot of these ancient names, right?
Yeah.
They get lost to time.
Yeah. But by the late Bronze Age, so like 1700 BCE, it had become this like powerful, fortified city-state.
Yeah, it's a real powerhouse.
Yeah.
At this point.
And then like around 1550 BCE, things start to get rough.
Yeah, things get a little shaky.
Yeah.
You get the late Bronze Age collapse.
Yeah, the late Bronze Age collapse.
Which is this period of widespread decline.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of debate about exactly what caused it.
Yeah.
There's evidence of drought, disruption of trade networks.
Right.
There's a lot of factors at play.
Right.
But what we see is a lot of these Bronze Age centers, they start to crumble.
Yeah.
And this is also the time when you see the decline of, Egyptian influence.
Right.
And eventually, you get the emergence of the Israelites and the Philistines.
Right. So it's really a whole reshuffling.
It is. It's a huge transition. And I think one of the things that the late Bronze Age collapse really shows us is how interconnected all these societies were.
Yeah.
And how vulnerable they were.
Yeah.
To these kinds of systemic shocks.
Yeah. Which I guess is kind of still relevant today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that, in the modern world with things like, climate change and pandemics.
Right.
These things that they can really shake things up.
Yeah. So it sounds like it was a time of like just massive upheaval.
Oh, yeah.
All across the ancient Near East. But Lachish, it seems like they weathered the storm better than a lot of their neighbor.
They did. They managed to, persist as an urban center.
Yeah.
While a lot of other places, really declined.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so then we jump ahead to like 1100 BCE.
Right.
And this is when we see like the hills of Samaria and Judea
Yeah.
starting to be resettled. And that marks the beginning of what we call the Israelite period.
That's right.
And we've got some cool archaeological stuff from Lachish from this time. Like they found seals with names that actually match up with like Judean kings mentioned in the Bible.
Right. Things like the Ben Stemmer seal,
Yeah.
which is really interesting because it kind of gives us this physical connection
Yeah, yeah.
between the archaeology and the biblical narrative.
It's like proof.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And Lachish becomes even more important during the time of the Judean kings.
Okay.
So we're talking 9th to 7th centuries BCE.
Okay.
And it's not just any settlement. It's a major fortified city.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a big deal.
And it's got this like giant palace.
It does. And this is actually the largest palace in all of Judea,
Oh, wow.
even bigger than the one in Jerusalem.
Really? So, like, what does that tell us?
It tells us that Lachish was a serious power player.
Okay, yeah.
And one of the reasons for that was its location.
Okay.
It was right on these vital ancient trade roads.
Okay, so it's like a crossroads?
It's a crossroads.
Okay.
It's connecting, places like Hebron, Jerusalem,
Uh-huh.
with the Mediterranean coast.
Right.
So it's like this major highway intersection
Okay, yeah.
in the ancient world.
Right, where I guess all these goods and ideas are flowing through.
Exactly.
Okay, so like what kinds of stuff are we talking about?
Well, this was a region that was really rich in agricultural produce.
Yeah, yeah. I guess you got like good soil and stuff.
Yeah, fertile soil and, a good climate.
Okay.
So you got things like grapes, which, were famous even in Roman times.
Oh, wow.
And you've got the staples, right?
Uh-huh.
Wheat, barley, olives, figs, pomegranates.
So like the breadbasket of
Yeah.
the kingdom, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's feeding a lot of people.
Yeah. But Lachish has more going for it than just like trade routes.
Right. It's not just about economics.
Yeah.
It's also about defense.
Okay.
So its elevated position naturally makes it a strong defensive point,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Hard to attack.
Yeah, hard to attack.
Uh-huh.
And then you've got access to reliable water sources.
Okay.
So rainwater collection systems, cisterns, wells, springs.
Okay. So they're set.
They're set.
Yeah.
They've got everything they need.
Yeah, it's like a real hub.
It is. It's a key player in the ancient Near East in terms of, economics and politics.
Yeah. It shows you how important like where you are can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Geography really can dictate destiny
Yeah.
sometimes.
And they think that like at its peak there were like 3,000 to 5,000 people living inside the walls.
Yeah, that's a pretty sizable population for the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, you've got that impressive palace, which probably served not only as, a royal residence,
Right.
but also as a fortress in times of trouble.
Right, right. When like the Philistines or the Egyptians are coming knocking.
Yeah, you want to be able to hunker down.
Yeah, yeah. But it wasn't just the like city walls.
Right. It was more than that.
Yeah. There's actually archaeological evidence of like guard posts and towers
That's right.
from like way back, like to the early Israelite settlement period.
So we're talking like 1200 BCE.
Yeah.
So they're really thinking about defense from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous world out there.
Yeah, yeah. So Lachish is this like major power.
Uh-huh.
And of course they're gonna attract attention
Right.
from the big guy on the block.
That's right. The Assyrian Empire.
Right, the Assyrian Empire. And this is where things get pretty dramatic.
Yeah, things are about to get real.
Yeah, for Lachish.
For Lachish. So you've got the Assyrians.
Uh-huh.
They're the superpower of the ancient world.
Yeah.
Nobody can touch them.
Yeah.
And their king, Sennacherib, he decides, you know what, I'm going to take Lachish.
Yeah.
Personally.
He's like, I'm going in.
He's like, I'm leading the charge.
Yeah, yeah. This isn't like a small like border skirmish.
Yes, this is the real deal.
This is full on like a military campaign.
This is a full-scale invasion.
Yeah. And they come in with like the most sophisticated siege tactics.
Oh, yeah. These guys they're not messing around.
Yeah, like they build this massive siege ramp.
Right. We're talking like 6,000 to 9,000 tons of stone and plaster.
Wow, that is huge.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of this thing is to get over the walls of Lachish.
Right, right.
And they're not just picking any random spot.
Yeah.
They're using the terrain to their advantage.
Okay, so they're like strategic about it.
Oh yeah, they're very strategic.
Yeah.
They're finding a natural saddle in the terrain. They're using an elevated hill so they can get a good vantage point.
Right.
It's really impressive.
Yeah.
The amount of planning that went into this.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not just about like brute force.
Right. It's also about, engineering.
Yeah, yeah.
And technology.
Right. And it really shows you like how, even if you've got good defenses.
Yeah.
If the enemy has got the right technology.
Yeah, they can overcome it.
Yeah.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can almost imagine what it must have been like.
Oh yeah.
To try and build this thing while people are shooting arrows at you.
I mean, it must have been terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. And the defenders of Lachish, they put up a good fight.
Oh, they did. They were not going down without a fight.
Yeah, yeah. They're throwing stones, torches, arrows.
They found like 1,000 arrowheads at the site.
Wow, okay.
So, I mean, you could just imagine the amount of arrows flying through the air.
Yeah, yeah.
And they even try to break the battering ram.
Yeah. With ropes and stuff?
With ropes and stones.
Yeah.
Trying to drop these things on it, to disable it.
Yeah. It's really that's pretty wild.
It is. It's a testament to their determination.
Yeah. And this is like one of the first really well documented cases.
That's right.
Of a battering ram being used like this.
In warfare.
Yeah.
It's kind of a turning point in siege technology.
Yeah. So it's an important moment.
It is. It's a significant development.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've even got King Sennacherib's own account of the siege.
Right.
Or at least like his version of it.
It's propaganda.
Yeah.
Right.
And he claims that he besieged like 46 fortified cities belonging to King Hezekiah.
Yeah.
Although probably it was less than that.
Probably a bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But still, a lot.
Yeah. But Lachish was like the big one.
Lachish was the main prize.
Yeah.
That was the one he really wanted.
Okay. And he's boasting about taking all these prisoners and trapping Hezekiah in Jerusalem.
Right.
So he's making a statement.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's sending a message to the whole region.
Yeah.
Don't mess with Assyria.
Right.
Yeah.
But what was his motivation?
I mean, ultimately, it's political.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
He wants to show that Assyria is still the top dog.
Okay.
And Hezekiah has been, part of this coalition.
Right.
That's stop paying tribute.
Stop paying taxes.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And Sennacherib's not having it.
Yeah.
So he's going to make an example of him.
So they're going after Lachish first.
Right.
To like really send a message.
It's the strongest link in Hezekiah's defenses.
Yeah. And only after they've taken Lachish do they then go to Jerusalem.
That's right. They want to soften him up first.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually Hezekiah surrenders.
Right. Pays a bunch of money.
Yeah, pays a heavy price.
Yeah. So Lachish makes it through this siege.
It does.
But it's not the end of their trouble.
No, not by a long shot. So they do rebuild after the Assyrian destruction in the later part of the Israelite period.
Right.
But then the Babylonians come along.
Oh, no.
And it's all over.
Yeah.
So we're talking 586, 587 BCE.
Okay.
King Zedekiah is in charge.
Yeah.
And the Babylonians, they just destroy the city.
Yeah.
Completely.
And this is where we get the Lachish letters.
Right.
Yeah.
These are incredible.
Yeah.
So tell me what you know about these.
So they're this collection of ostraka.
Right, ostrak.
Which are these like pottery fragments that they use for writing.
That's right. Basically like ancient scrap paper.
Yeah. And they were found by this archaeologist, James Starkey, back in 1935. And they're considered some of the most important, epigraphic discoveries.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these are like firsthand accounts.
Yeah.
From the people who were there.
Yeah. Of the Babylonian siege.
Yeah.
And just like how bad things were in Lachish.
Yeah. It's really powerful stuff.
Yeah. So it's like we're not just talking about, old objects.
Right.
We're talking about like a direct connection to these people.
To the people who lived through this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So like what do we actually learn from these letters?
Well, for one thing, we learn about the warnings of prophets like Jeremiah and Uriah.
Okay.
Who were predicting that the city was going to fall.
Okay.
Because the people weren't following the Torah.
Right, right. They're straying from the path.
Yeah, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Uh-huh.
And King Zedekiah is trying to silence these prophets
Right.
because he doesn't want to hear it.
He doesn't want to hear the bad news.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, they're speaking truth to power.
Yeah, yeah. And there's one letter that's particularly like sad, I guess.
Yeah, it's a poignant one.
It says that they can't see the signal fires from Azekah anymore,
Right.
which was another fortified city.
Yeah.
So that means that it had fallen.
It had already fallen
Yeah.
to the Babylonians.
Before Lachish.
Yeah,
And that actually matches up with like what the Bible says.
it does.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see that confirmation.
Yeah, it's like the archaeology is backing up the story.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But it's not just about the like big historical stuff.
Right.
The letters also give us like little glimpses into like everyday life.
Okay.
There's a phrase, "Is your servant a dog?"
Yeah.
that appears in one of the letters.
Yeah.
And that same phrase is actually in the Book of Kings.
Right. So it suggests that this was like a common expression
Yeah, yeah.
at the time.
And it's those little things that really like bring it to life.
Absolutely. It's those human touches that make it feel real.
Yeah, yeah. So what happens to Lachish after the Babylonians?
Well, after the Babylonians, the Persian Empire takes over.
Okay.
And Lachish becomes part of, a Persian administrative district.
Right.
But it never really regains its former glory.
Right.
It's still inhabited, but it's not the powerhouse that it once was.
Right. Right. And then eventually the Hellenistic period comes along.
Right.
And that's the end.
That's the end of the line for Lachish.
Yeah.
Whatever was left of the city gets destroyed.
Right. I mean, it really shows you how like empires and cities, they rise and fall.
They do. It's a constant cycle.
Yeah, yeah.
Throughout history.
Now, our sources also talk about all these different archaeological teams
Yes.
that have worked on Lachish over the years.
It's been a real collaborative effort.
Yeah, yeah.
You've got James Starkey, Yohanan Aharoni, David Isishkin, Joseph Garfinkel.
Right.
And even today, there are still excavations going on.
Yeah, yeah. And they've each kind of uncovered different pieces.
Different pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, of the Lachish story.
Yeah. It's interesting, some of the earlier archaeologists, particularly the British, they were really focused on the Israelite period.
Okay.
And sometimes they would actually, discard later material.
Oh, wow.
Because they weren't interested in it.
Wow.
They were just trying to get to the earliest levels.
Yeah.
Which, it makes sense to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But it also means that, we've lost some information.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, like modern preservation efforts are more about, protecting everything.
Absolutely. I mean, we recognize now that all these periods are important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we need to preserve them all.
Yeah. And they're actually doing some cool stuff at Lachish to protect the remains.
Oh, yeah. They're doing things like reconstructing mud brick walls on top of the original foundations to protect them from erosion.
Right, right. So it's like a protective shell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've also reconstructed part of the gate complex.
Oh, cool.
Which is, one of the most impressive features of the site.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of the gate complex,
yes,
it sounds like it was pretty amazing.
It was. It was a real marvel of ancient engineering.
Yeah.
And it was the heart of the city.
Okay, so walk me through it.
Okay, so you've got this double gate system.
Okay, so 2 gates.
2 gates, an outer gate and an inner gate.
Okay.
And then you've got towers strategically placed.
Blah.
And then the entrance itself is L-shaped.
Oh, okay.
Which is designed to slow down attackers.
Okay.
And expose them.
Right, right.
To fire from above.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a very well thought out defensive system.
Right. But it wasn't just about like military stuff.
Right. It was more than that.
Yeah.
So archaeologists believe that the gate area also functioned as a marketplace.
Okay.
An administrative center.
So like the center of like daily life.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And possibly even a religious precinct.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And there's even like a sewage system.
Yeah, running underneath.
Wow.
So you can see that they really put a lot of thought into the planning of this city.
Right.
They weren't just throwing things together.
Yeah, yeah. And they found some specific things in the gate area that are
Yes.
kind of
And
interesting.
are very interesting. So two things in particular.
Okay.
A four-horned altar
Great.
and what appears to be a toilet seat.
Oh, okay.
Now, the altar obviously suggests that religious practices were taking place here,
Yeah.
but the toilet seat is a little more mysterious.
Yeah.
Some scholars think that it might be evidence of deliberate desecration
Okay.
during the religious reforms of King Hezekiah.
Okay, so he's trying to like
He's trying to centralize worship in Jerusalem.
right, right.
And so one way to do that is to make the religious structures elsewhere
Uh-huh.
unusable.
Right, right.
And so putting a toilet seat
Yeah.
in a sacred space,
Yeah, yeah. That'll do it.
that's a pretty effective way of doing that.
Yeah. But we also know that like earlier on,
Yeah.
you had like Canaanite temple complexes.
That's right. Dedicated to all sorts of different deities.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like the religious landscape
Yeah.
is changing over time.
It's evolving.